Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Deal. Some late Sunday night breaking news, and quite frankly, some expected news for the Oklahoma Sooner fans. Seth Littrell out as Oklahoma's offensive coordinator. John Finley going to get promoted to the play calling duties. Kevin Johns, low-key really like Kevin Johns. He's going to be elevated to the quarterback's coach. Want to get into a little bit of what didn't work with Seth Latrell, but I think the answer is pretty obvious. Like when you go into SEC play with an offensive line like that, you're not going to get good results. And quite frankly, I know I'm not defending Seth Latrell. Like this was a very, very bad offense, a hard offense to watch. I don't know how many offensive coordinators are making it work behind an offensive line like that. Dill, I think the more fascinating conversation is what names pop up for Oklahoma offensive coordinator candidates that we like. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Oklahoma fans, this is some of my favorite college football talk, like talking about the coaching carousel and what candidates fit and are the best fits. For the Oklahoma fans, like let it fly in the comment section. We're going to be talking a lot about this. What names stand out to you as who do you want to see take over this Oklahoma offense heading into 2025? If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. And Dill, without further ado, I'll give you the tee box here. Seth Littrell out as Oklahoma's OC. What do you think went wrong with this short but really?
I mean, nothing went right. That's almost where you start. It's like you can't put that on. I don't care what your personnel is. This is still Oklahoma. The offensive line wasn't a good SEC offensive line for sure.
No.
But I think you kind of said it. There just never felt like there was a plan. There was never something they could go to. And it was getting juggled every week. Like they were trying something new. They were trying quarterback run. Then they'd go to other sort of run. Then they'd pull the quarterback. Like it was chaos. They never had anything going. And they could never execute at any sort of level that you needed to execute at in big games. And yeah, whether that's personnel, whatever, ultimately that's going to fall on the coach, and he didn't get it done. So I think this is a good move. Like,
It had to happen, and you can talk about the offensive line's been a disaster, and Coach Bill B, like that's a separate conversation. A guy that historically has been really good at his job. This is by far this might be one of the worst offensive lines we see at the Power 4 level. That's saying something because there's a lot of bad offensive lines, but when you have this kind of offensive line in the SEC, you just can't have much success. And I know there's been some injuries, but I'm kind of with you. Like at the end of the day, you sit down to watch this Oklahoma offense. What's their identity? What do they want to go to that they think can work? It just never seemed like they had any structure or identity to this offense that falls on Seth Littrell. They're moving on. Like I don't think
it was even when they were like outmatching teams. It's like when their offensive line wasn't getting totally exposed. Like I get when they go play South Carolina, like they're not going to block that team ever, and that's going to be a problem jump start to finish. But when you're playing at Houston, I mean, Houston doesn't have defensive linemen who are beating up that Oklahoma, and Oklahoma's offensive line's not dominating them, but they're not getting beaten up, and you score like 15 points or something. Like, yeah, that's not good enough, and that can't be blamed on the players. That's the coaches need to be able to put an offense together that team can execute, and they just can never really do it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I mean, I don't think we don't need to go down a rabbit hole about this. Like, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to know, like, whatever was happening there wasn't working out. BV had to make a decision. Now, Dill, I got 3 names that I want to bring up, and we're going to talk a lot about more names in the next couple of weeks. But I want to start with this conversation because I think this is really important in terms of having the replacement offensive coordinator conversation. What kind of offensive coordinator do you want to go out and get? And I kind of have a take that I know you don't necessarily agree with, so I'll give you a chance to respond here. Wouldn't you want to get an offensive coordinator that fits how Brent Venables wants this team to look? It just seems like there was a disconnect, even going back to Jeff Lebby. Like Brent Venables as a head coach wants to control the time possession, play smothering defense, and kind of strangle out teams, kind of similar to what we saw Michigan do in 2023. But you go get an offensive coordinator that wants to win these shootout games, that plays really fast, and just cares about putting points up on the board. And don't get me wrong, you're an offensive coordinator. Your job is to put points up on the scoreboard. Does it make sense? Or can you see where I'm coming from? Where Oklahoma, when you're looking for this next offensive coordinator, wouldn't you want it to fit a little bit more in the identity of how Brent Venables wants this Oklahoma offense to look?
And that's an interesting point. And I think you kind of said the opportune word, if you will, or opportune phrase, and that's they got to score points. Like by hook or by crook, the points got to get put up on the
Yeah.
board. Whether you're going to run it fast, whether you're going to run it slow. I don't totally agree that you should tailor. I think you should just go get the best guy. Scheme fit is what it is. I think you expect your defense to just play good. And if you're going to be a really good team and a deep team, what Oklahoma I think wants to be, frankly, I look at it and say, all right, just go get me points and I'll do the rest on the defense side of the ball. Like, yeah, if you score more points, you maybe will give up more points, but I don't think, again, I think you want to get a guy who can put some points up because
I just feel like even with Jeff Lebby putting up a lot of points, like Oklahoma still got into some of those really close football games where I think it had a lot to do with when you're running this fast, you're not really playing to your strength. Like what is always going to be the strength of this Oklahoma team under Brent Venables? It's going to be the defense. You look at Georgia or you look at Michigan, like they weren't concerned about putting 50 points on the scoreboard every single game. They were concerned about, hey, we want to limit the amount of times the opposing offense gets to touch the ball. When they do get to touch the ball, our defense is going to be fresh and ready to kind of dominate and strangle out teams.
There's the Michigan argument with the Josh Gaddis situation where they brought the speed and space system in, and that's what they ran in 21. And then they went back to more of a Jim Harbaugh classic, more pro style attack that was a little bit slower, huddle up, all those sort of things. That's probably your best argument, but I still look at it. It's like, okay, you're Penn State. Yeah, you want to play good defense, but you look across the college football landscape, you want to get a guy like Coach Koldenicki who's just going to put him up, and whether he's running fast, and I know he likes to run the ball, so he maybe isn't the opportune guy, but you got to get a
guy. If Coach Koldenicki was available, that would be my first call. Like I know he's at Penn State. I don't know if Oklahoma can go swing that. He's ideal. Because what does he do? He's going to run the football. He's going to control the time possession, plays absurdly slow, but is also able to be efficient and explosive and play and protect the defense. Like that's the ideal offensive coordinator if I'm Oklahoma. A guy that's going to be explosive when necessary, but also going to run the football, control the clock, and let this defense really take over football games. That kind of gets me into this conversation, Dale. This kid, I shouldn't call him a kid, but he's a young cat. Mike Shanahan at Indiana. Brilliant. This Indiana team I do not think is very talented. You take a look at the numbers. They're scoring 44 points per game. That's number 3 in the country. It's an extremely balanced offensive attack. They don't play super fast, but they score a lot of points. They're top 5 in scoring. Dill, this is, in my opinion, this is exactly what Oklahoma should be looking for in the new offensive coordinator.
No, and you get anything off that Curt Cignetti tree right now because something he's doing out there in IU, what he was doing at James Madison, certainly working. And I think the big thing I look at with what Mike Shanahan's done and what that coaching staff's done in general is make a quarterback really comfortable. And good God, this Oklahoma team has made some quarterbacks look ungodly uncomfortable. So I look at what they did with Curtis Rourke. I mean, he just looks so comfortable out there, and they're not loaded around him. I mean, you look, Tom Allen didn't leave that team a ton of talent. They had to bring a lot in on the fly. Something they're doing is really working because they got their quarterbacks playing at a really, really high level. And again, I think that might be the first thing I'm looking at. Whatever else, somebody who can develop quarterbacks.
It's really hard to find offensive coordinators that are top 5 in points per game, but also at least top 50 in time possession. Like that's what Mike Shanahan is doing at Indiana. That seems perfect where you get an offensive coordinator, although young, the track record is not necessarily huge at the power 4 level. How he runs the offense, but also plays towards the defense. I think that makes a ton of sense. And know another similar name, Dill, that I've been always really impressed with. And again, talk about good coaching staffs. You talk about programs you want to grab coaches from. Andy Ludwig at Utah. And he's available, Dill, because what did Utah do? They named the defensive coordinator kind of next in line for the head coaching candidacy. Andy Ludwig was even looking at going to Notre Dame in the offseason. This is another one of those. He's not going to be a guy that's top 10 in points per game, but he's going to play very, very good football. They're going to move the football. They're going to run the football. And on the opposite side, they play good defense. So you look at what Utah is doing, at least in my opinion, this is what Oklahoma should be trying to do as a program. Play really good defense, play solid offense, but I don't know if you need an offensive coordinator that's going to run 80 plays a game and not really play to the strength of your team. Andy Ludwig's done that at such a high level at Utah for a very long time.
As we're going through this, I'm almost like coming around to that a little bit because you're kind of right. You want a guy who's played that Oklahoma style of football. If Oklahoma was playing that way right now, they'd be really pretty good because that defense is great. And you look at Utah hasn't really had a ton of talent on offense, so that's probably the other issue with maybe hiring a guy who's not particularly explosive. Is it's hard to go convince big time offensive weapons to join that scheme. But again, you're Oklahoma. I think you recruit yourself to an extent. So I don't necessarily know that I'd fear that. But again, you might be onto something.
That's a really, really interesting conversation. Are you that concerned about recruiting when you're hiring your offensive coordinator? Look, I'm much more concerned about recruiting when I'm hiring a defensive coordinator because I'm very into the camp that if you just have the dudes on defense, chances are you're going to be pretty dang good. But if you have an offense that the offensive coordinators know how to run an offense, you can have all the playmakers you want. You're not going to have very good offense. On the offensive side, you should be relying on a position coach, so a running back coach, wide receiver coach, which Oklahoma has very good recruiters on their staff. You hire Andy Ludwig, the first conversation will be, oh, can he recruit to Oklahoma? I don't think he's the best recruiter in the game, but you got guys around you that can get a ton on the recruiting trail. And I think, quite frankly, that's what matters more is the position coaches. That's my first conversation when you're hiring a position coach. Go get a guy that can recruit his tail off. The OC job, I'm more concerned with the body of work that you've shown that you can run an offense and you know what you're doing. And Andy Ludwig is a guy that's done it for a really long time at a very high level. Dill, last one, and I'll let you take the lead on this one. Brennan Marion at UNLV. This kid would be the ultimate recruiter at Oklahoma. There's no doubt in my mind. Now, this gets a little bit away from my way of thinking, and that is Oklahoma should go get an offensive coordinator that's a little bit more balanced. That go offense, it's going to put a lot of points up on the board. It's not going to necessarily be the most complementary offense to the defense. But you talk about, hey, I want an offensive coordinator that's going to light up the scoreboard. Brennan Marion knows how to run an offense.
And the thing I like about Marion, and I think he got a chance to show it, frankly, is last year he had quarterbacks who could throw. It was Brumfield and it was Mayava, and he could put the ball in the air and be really, really effective doing it that way. Now he had Sluka and then obviously Malik Williams, two guys who don't really throw the ball at all, and he's scoring a lot of points that way. So I look at, again, a guy who is brilliant at coaching his talent, getting the guys to putting a system, I guess, around them that fits what they're doing. And you probably argue that was a big problem with what Oklahoma had this year is they wanted to run the Levy system. That's what they were going to do. Not sure they had the wide receivers to do it. Certainly not sure they had the offensive line to throw the amount of times that they seemed like they wanted to throw. And that's kind of what you get. So I look at Marion. I mean, him to me is the ultimate up and coming offensive mind. I think UNLV is so creative, what they do, so brilliant. I love it.
Not a shot at UNLV, but I
told them I want him in Michigan.
Yeah, and not a shot at UNLV, but I am extremely surprised he's still there. I don't know what these head coaches are doing. They should go. If you have an offense that's struggling, Brennan Marion should be one of your first calls because he does. And you said something that's really important. We'll close on this. Can you get an offensive coordinator that knows how to coach to his players? Because you're not going to have the same offense every single year. Right. And you look at certain offense. I think Jimbo Fisher, I know he's not an offensive coordinator, but he's a play caller that was brilliantly bad at this. Hey, look, I had an offense that ran really well with Jameis Winston, and then I tried to run it with every other quarterback that I've had, and I've never really changed it, and it just didn't fit a lot of personnel he had at Texas A&M. You got to get an offensive mind that knows how to create an offense around the quarterback and the playmakers you have. Brennan Marion, like you said, brilliant at this. This would be a little bit of I would say a little bit risk because he is it's a little bit of a gadgety offense, so to speak. But man, he knows how to put points up on the board. We'll continue this conversation, and we're probably going to get.
People would have said that about Koldenicky. I feel like oh yeah, that's what you have to do when you're at Kansas. But we're Penn State. We still run like this vanilla, just beat teams up with our offensive line. That was their mentality, and they just when they went and played good teams, that's just not how it works. I think you need creativity. I also don't I don't totally agree with the idea that it's a gadget. I mean, it's creative and it's throwing a lot at you, but there's simple principles, I think, that kind of make it go in terms of what they want to do in the run game. It's just kind of simple option principles. They do it a little bit of different ways. They do some window dressing, but it's still the same kind of principles you'd run in a normal option kind of offensive attack. Similar passing concepts, like passing concepts are passing concepts at the end of the day. How you use them, how you show them, and what you're presenting to the defense. Yeah, you can get a little creative. I think you should want to be a little creative. So
you're gonna have a field day if Oklahoma hires Brennan Marion, you're gonna have a field day going over some UNLV film. I know that. All right, we'll cut it out there. Sunday night, some breaking news, and I think some exciting news. And I'm not saying exciting like a guy's losing his job, but it had to change, and it's going to be an exciting conversation for Oklahoma over the next couple of weeks. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.